Say hello. Whoa, no, let's not record that. Let's not do that. And good evening, everyone, again. Welcome to OTF Connects presents Sparking Student Curiosity with Louise and James Steves. I'm Colin Jago. I'll be moderating this evening, and we're about to get started. One of the great things about OTF is that we bring together people from all over the province, and you can see on our little map here that we've in fact done that already. We got people from Ear Falls up north all the way down to the the Golden Horseshoe and around southern Ontario. So it's really cool to see everybody here this evening, and looking forward to a really great session. So we're going to get started. This is Louise Robitaille and James Steves. They're going to talk to us about sparking student curiosity in SSHG. And I've looked through their stuff, and they've got some really cool ideas. And I always love learning about inquiry. I love doing inquiry-based learning with my kids, and I'm always looking for new tips and tricks. So I'm looking forward to learning something this evening as well. So Louise and James, I'm going to jump off the mic, and it's over to you folks. And if you need anything, you'll just let me know.
Thanks, Colin. I'll just get started. I wanted to say welcome and thank you for joining us tonight. James and I are happy to be here. James is going to say a few things and introduce himself first, and then I'll say a few things about myself and introduce myself. So if James would like to do that now.
Okay. Good evening, everybody. My name's James Steves. I'm a grade 7 LASS teacher with the Peel District School Board, and I'm also in my first year as teacher librarian and doing my first book fair on Monday, so I've been very busy setting that up. I've also been involved with the new Nelson history textbooks, which the grade 7 one you may have seen come on the market in the fall. And as far as inquiry is concerned, it's something I've been doing for about 2.5 years. And I'm very excited about sharing some of the experiences I've had and hearing about some of your own experiences.
Thanks, James. I'm a newly retired elementary teacher. I taught from JK to grade 8. My last couple of years, I spent time as a special education teacher, again, with the JK students right to grade 8 and supporting teachers. I taught AQ courses for elective for a number of years and really enjoyed that. But the highlight of my career, I would say, was when I worked with my colleague Pete, and together we built an inquiry-based classroom. So I'm going to be talking to you a little bit about that tonight and sharing our story. For us, it all started with TLLP, and if you have never heard of the TLLP, I would suggest that you look it up. It's a teacher learning and leadership program with the ministry, and it's amazing PD. So we focused on the explored and investigated the inquiry-based approach to teaching, and we never looked back. Now in my retirement, I'm busy volunteering in classes, and I'm also a member of AWESTA, and we'll be talking about AWESTA quite a bit tonight, James and I. And I participate with them in a number of ways. I like to use social media. We've got our Twitter handle on the front page there, and I like to stay connected, and I still feel like I have things to share with folks. So we'd like to know about you. Let me just change slides here. We'd like to know what grade you teach and have you used the AWESTA website. If you could just maybe use the chat box or use the text box, and we'll give you a few minutes. We'd like to know who we're talking to. If you could just add that to the chat box or to the slide.
Yeah, so I'll just pop in, and you can, like I said, like Louise said, you can either just pop it in the chat, or if you wanted to grab the text tool and create a text label right on the slide, you're welcome to do it that way as well. Either one will work.
Thanks, Colin. Okay, so it looks like we're going to be able to share some information about the website. It's fairly new, and we're pretty excited about it. So a lot of what we're going to be sharing with you tonight is directly from that website, and it was built especially for teachers in Ontario to support the social studies, history, and geography curriculum. So thank you. It looks like we have a mix from K to 6. Teaching grade 3 in the fall. Love grade 3. So our objective tonight, our goal, is going to be kind of in 3 pieces. I'm going to be talking about my classroom experience with Pete and how we used it to engage students and increase curiosity. James will be looking at exploring the primary sources and with activities that you might be able to use tomorrow. And we're going to be talking about networking. And we're hoping that we can continue the conversation and that tonight's not the only night that we get to chat with you, but through social media or email, we'll be able to connect with you about what you heard today or maybe some questions that you might have later on. I'll let James explain the exit card.
Okay, we were thinking that it would be neat if you could, while you're watching, think about 3 things that you learn, 2 questions that you have, and then 1 strategy that you will use in the classroom. And this technique, I love 3-2-1. It's so simple, but it's something that you can use for any number of things in the classroom. But for us, be thinking of those 3 things that you've learned, the questions that you have at the end, and then, of course, a strategy that you can use, hopefully, tomorrow in the classroom.
And we'll actually refer to that at the end of the presentation. So maybe you can either share it or just do your own reflection. So sparking student curiosity. What it is, what it isn't. What does it sound like, feel like, what does it look like? If you could take your, I think we would really like it if you could write in on our slide and use the text box, but if you can't do that, as long as you can use the chat box, that would be great. What it is and what it isn't. I'll give you a couple of seconds to fill that in. Thanks.
Yeah, and if you forget, on the gray toolbar on the left side of the whiteboard, you just click on the one that's an A, and it should pop out, and it's probably best to use the capital A, so that's a text label, and you can type in and stuff like that. It should be fun, so I just added that. So very quick to add stuff like that, so there you go. Awesome, people are doing it. Wicked.
I'll just give you another second to finish your thinking. All right, this is excellent. So what I'm seeing is what it is. It's students engaged, fun, discussion, noisy, engaging, messy, safe environment to learn, creative, busy, excited. That's exactly what we're talking about when we talk about an inquiry-based classroom. And what it isn't exactly, I think we're all on the same page when we think about what curiosity might look like in our classrooms. An inquiry builds on a natural curiosity, and it leads to higher order thinking, and that's what research tells us about that. And a lot of information is out there, and this one link I recommend if you haven't used it before. It's the Capacity Building Series. They have excellent research-based information that is worth looking into. Now, we know that children are open to wonder and curiosity, and they're eager to learn. So I think as teachers, if we adopt the inquiry approach, then the students have more opportunity to seek answers to their questions that they're interested in, that are important to them and relevant. The one thing that works really well that we found is that it enables them to address curriculum content in a real-world way. And so when we look at a classroom, an inquiry-based classroom, we see self-directed learners, and we know that the students are usually motivated, and because it's a student-centered classroom, not so much a teacher-directed classroom. So to foster and build the culture of inquiry, we need to think about our classroom and I think our own mindset. When Pete and I started with this, we weren't too sure where it was going to go and what it was going to look like, but we witnessed the changes in our students and how they developed and grew in our inquiry-based classroom. One of the things we came to understand was that the inquiry is not an occasional classroom event. It's what and who we are now. It's not limited to a particular subject, although some subjects really apply well to it. It's really at the heart of our teaching and learning. It took us a while to move in and shift into that, and it wasn't something that came easy, and it's not something that, it was something that we had to work at. But there was definitely a shift, and we were very happy with about that shift and what it did for us as professionals. We were now happy to be coming to school. Teachers were excited, students were excited, parents were happy, our administrator was very happy. Oh, I just noticed that my second question's not there. We're going to get you to watch a video clip. And in the video clip, it's produced by OESTA, and it's about 4 minutes long, and you're going to see myself, my teaching partner Pete, and our administrator. And Pete is going to share a little bit about maybe why he shifted and what his teaching style was like before, and his thinking of teaching and the way he thinks about teaching now. Our principal actually talks a little bit about how we celebrate student learning. And I actually talk about a resource that we use, because when we started talking about inquiry, how do we start? What does that look like? And so what we decided to do was we found a resource that helped us on the road. We've changed from that, and we've grown, and we're still, Pete's still changing and growing, but the key characteristics are still the same. But I'll talk about a little bit about the resource that we used to help get us going in that video. And collaborating in team teaching was one of the best things I ever did in my career. It was just so rewarding, and no longer were we teaching in isolation. And Pete and I talk about that, and you'll see that as you watch, you'll see that, and you'll hear Pete's excitement, the excitement in his voice, and the energy he has now for teaching. So what I'm going to do is stop talking, and I'm going to let you watch the video. I think Colin is going to put the video link in the chat box. So after you're finished watching, if you could just give us a check mark to let us know when you're done, and then I will kind of reflect on the video and take a look at a couple of questions I have for you around that video.
Okay, so I'm going to put it in the chat box, but I'm also going to put it right in the middle here. So as soon as I hit enter, the video should start playing on your screen. It'll play on your own computer, and then when you get to the end, just stop it and then give us a green check mark. And if it doesn't play for some reason on your screen, I will put the link in the chat box. So I'm going to hit enter now. The video should come up, and I'll put it in the chat box as well. So in about 4 minutes or so, then we can hit the green check marks. So if the video is over, just give us that green check mark up on that polling feature again, and we'll give it a few more minutes. I think most people have probably finished it. Okay, so I think we'll come back to the whiteboard then, and Louise, I'll send it back to you. I'm not hearing anything. I'm not sure if you guys were talking or not. Louise, were you saying something? You have to turn your mic back on if that's the case. There we go.
Oh, thanks, Colin.
You bet.
So I'd just like to know how you feel about what you saw on that video. There were a couple of issues that came up in the chat box. People were wondering about our classroom, if it was chaotic and what that might look like. And I am going to talk about that in the next couple of slides. But what I'd like to do right now is have you think about, as you're watching, I'm hoping that you noticed Pete's excitement for teaching and maybe the reasons for changing. And what do you think the benefits are of collaborating with your colleagues? So if you could just please share that in the either in the chat box or on the slide, that would be great. Oh, I like the comment about sharing ideas and failures too. That's what we learn from, isn't it? Now, someone wrote something that I do not. You do not have the opportunity to work with colleagues. And sometimes we don't have colleagues in our school that we can work with, but I think there are different ways nowadays that you can connect with teachers, social media, the website. On the increased collaboration between teachers, making teaching and learning experience fun is exactly what Pete and I experienced. I know when I retired, he was very happy. It's just that every day you bounced out of bed and were just happy to go to school, and we were always connecting throughout the day, and at the end of the day, planning and talking about what happened in his classroom. As the special education teacher, I was able to spend some quality time in there doing some team teaching with them. So it was a great experience. And if you can, then find someone in your staff room or in your school board to collaborate with. I think you'd really enjoy it. So when Pete and I had our TLLP, and we started because we weren't happy with the way things were going in the classroom. Pete was the traditional teacher lecturing, and he was talking head in front of the classroom. His desk was always piled high with all kinds of papers to mark, and so he really felt like he needed a change. So this was a perfect timing for him and a perfect opportunity to learn about a new approach in teaching and changing his ways. And we really wanted to spark interest and curiosity in our students. And I think the very first thing we did was we looked at our classroom environment. And we changed it quite a bit. When we first started, Pete went into his classroom and he took a hard look at what was in there and tried to figure out what he could keep, which he didn't really need as much as he had in there for himself. Basically everything that's in the classroom now are materials that are easily accessible and used mostly for the students. So some of the key characteristics that changed for him was that he had you'll see in the slide there, in one of the pictures, it's a whole group meeting area. And that area he uses when he's introducing a mini lesson, but that area is also used when the students are presenting their work. And so we have a whole group meeting place, we have a classroom library, we have small groups now. There's rows we don't have desks in rows anymore. I don't think many people do that much anymore, but he has desks, but he places them in groupings. And it's easy for him to change his groups at any time. The kids just pick up their desk and move along. Those small groups are flexible groupings. He will decide who's in a group, and sometimes the kids decide who they're going to work with. But at the end of the year, each and every student in that classroom they've worked with one another, and so they know one another very well, and they're very protective of each other. And so that small group work and teamwork has really made a difference in that classroom. And it takes a long time to get that organized. That doesn't just learning how to collaborate is not that easy for kids. So part of our job then is to make sure that we teach that before we get into big inquiries. With the small groupings turn out to be workstations. So during inquiry time, We have buckets with material in it, and so each of the working areas could be an activity center. And you'll notice on the one slide, there's Pete sitting in front of his kids there, and we've got, this is just the beginning of one of his inquiries. And so during our inquiries, we always have vocabulary charts, WL charts, and questions that we build together throughout the inquiry, whatever the topic might be. And you'll see the ledge there is filled with resources for students. And we also provide websites for students to use, and they can use that once they start exploring and investigating. They'll use that to the websites at home or at school. We share it with the parents so that they know what's going on. And if the kids really get into it, they're looking for, oh, my phone's ringing, I'll just ignore that. They're looking for their own kind of information, and they're doing all kinds of work at home without us even asking them to do that. And so they'll even come to school with experiments that they've worked on or something that they've built on, at home, and they want to share with the classroom and share their learning, whatever that might be. One of the features of inquiry that has made a huge difference for us is that that space that you see there is used by the kids, and never does Pete ever have a lot of work sitting on his desk ready to be marked. Everything that the kids do is presented one way or another through technology or drama, whatever it is presented to the class and is given feedback. So I think in some cases this is why our kids are engaged and motivated. They know that whatever they're doing, they're going to be sharing with their peers, so they try and make sure that they present the best work possible. And actually, the quality of work far exceeds our expectations once the kids get working on that. And so it's really important that we build a culture of inquiry. And part of that is relationships. And we want our kids to feel safe, and so building relationships and really getting to know our students, who they are, what they are like, and showing that you care is really, they'll do anything for you. Their confidence blooms, and they feel they can question and challenge your thinking. No longer do they just sit there and listen to Pete. They feel comfortable in challenging his thinking or challenging perspective, which is exactly what we want our kids to do. They become critical thinkers, and they're not afraid to challenge. Now, at the beginning, when we first started doing this, there were some students who really had difficulty with this because they count on being told what to know. And they can memorize facts, and they usually do very well on paper pencil kind of activities. But when we were giving them the chance to explore and inquire, it really took them a long time to get their head around, because they just really wanted the teacher to just tell me what to do, tell me what you know. And so it's a good experience for all kids all the way around. Pete spends a lot of time working with his kids and working one-on-one or working with small groups, as you saw on the other slide. And the only way that that's possible is if we have really worked hard at creating independent, self-directed learners. And that doesn't happen by itself. People were talking about, chaos or whatever, but if you have modeled, and if you have explicitly taught them how to work together and teach them norms for a respectful classroom, and we go over that throughout the year, and some of them they have to do it more often, some groups have to do it more often than with others, and usually by the end of the year, the kids have really connected, and they depend on each other. They're not after Pete. What do I do now? How do I fix this? They've really learned how to become independent learners. And that has made a huge difference, because we really needed, Pete is never sitting at his desk. He's always sitting with the students. he's always pushing them to the next level, or he knows exactly where they are, and he knows where they need to go next. So he really, for assessment, his observations mean a lot, and he's constantly giving feedback to the students. So the classroom then has turned into a busy little workshop. I know some people put down that it's busy, and it could be noisy, but usually it's all positive kind of noises. It's not chaos, and the students work on their own. It's usually hands-on and authentic as much as possible with real-world experiences. Now, I know that James is going to be talking to you about using primary sources that stimulate that curiosity. And, James, are you ready to share about using primary resources?
Yes, I'm all set. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Well, thank you, Louise, for going through what inquiry can look like. And I have to admit, I'm quite envious of the opportunity that you had working with Peter. When I started inquiry a couple of years ago, I felt very much on my own, and it's a little scary to completely change the way that you teach. But it's through watching those videos and through Twitter, actually, the Twitter chats with Oesta and so on. Just knowing that there are other people out there trying these kinds of things, and finding certain things work and don't work, and being able to share that way, it's really got me through that especially that first year of switching to a full inquiry approach. And I tell you, you never go back once you go into it. I just hate it when I get something from my grade level team and they want me to teach using a worksheet or something, and it's like, no, that's not the way I do it. I've got to do it so that students have more choice and so on. One of the things that I've noticed coming up in the questions, though, is how to spark that curiosity and how to get kids engaged. One of the things that Oesta has been working on, quite a large project, is making some videos about using primary sources in the classroom and using them as a way to spark curiosity and using them as a way of teaching inquiry. So I'm going to show you a couple of things that you could use tomorrow, a couple of simple strategies using primary sources, but then also show you a little bit what it can look like when you use primary sources as the centerpiece for your whole planning. I noticed I should have added a slide here on what primary sources are, but we're talking about anything that where someone who had a first-hand account of an event is sharing that account through pictures, journal entries, maps, newspaper articles, things like that. It can also include artifacts. So if you're any kind of object or tool or something that was used at the time, clothing, ticket stubs, architecture, geography can all be examples of primary sources. And if you use them a certain way, especially at the start of a unit, it can really help to stimulate that curiosity. It also encourages kids to analyze resources, to analyze images, to use critical thinking. And I like it because it provides them with an opportunity to think like a historian. When I started with my grade 7 class this year, I picked up a textbook and I said, this isn't history. This is a book about history. They've already done the history. And then I went on to say how the real pieces of history, the real activities of a historian are the analyzing and working with those primary sources and piecing together a comprehensible narrative of what was happening. Some of the skills involved in using primary sources, formulating questions, getting kids thinking about a certain topic, then analyzing and interpreting those sources. It provides a great opportunity to apply the historical or geographical thinking concepts for history, significance, cause, consequence, change in continuity or perspective, and an opportunity to look at the conclusions they've drawn from those sources, evaluating and drawing those conclusions. all of which are, you'll note, steps in the inquiry process as it's shown in the curriculum document. So I'm going to try something here. And I have a picture up on the screen. And what I want you to do is analyze the picture, but I want you to separate your observations from your inferences. So observations are things that you see, like there's a man or there's a river. I won't say too much because you're supposed to see it. And inferences when you're starting to read into that. Who do you think it is? Where are they? And so on. And I'm wondering if we can use the text boxes, or you could put it in the chat. But think about what are some observations when you look at this picture, and what are some inferences that you'd like to draw based on those observations. Maybe I'll give you a couple more minutes. A few more seconds. I don't want to stop you. You're coming up with some really great responses there. So you notice already that instead of just having kids analyze the picture, I've asked them to separate those observations from the inferences. What are they actually seeing? But then what are the inferences that they're drawing? So they can see, well, what's the evidence for those inferences? That's where we want their inquiry to go ultimately. Now, I didn't think this through very well because I'm going to click the slide. So I guess we're going to lose those responses. But when I add these two pictures, and I know we lost our inferences, but based on what you saw before, is anything new that you see, and then any new inferences or changes to the inferences that you had before? All of these things are related. Oh, thanks. Colin, did you do that?
I did, just a quick copy and paste.
Perfect. That's awesome. Yeah. So then in that third column there, what are some new inferences that you have, or things you want to change from what you said before? I'll give you one more minute. All right, I kind of wish you all had your mics on, because usually when I do this, by now everybody is trying to guess, who is this guy, what's going on, and all these rich questions that are going on in the classroom. Maybe on the side panel, click on the check mark if you want to tell me who this person is.
And don't feel shy. You just grab the microphone and pop on there, anybody who wants to. You're more than welcome to do that.
Sure, that's right, yeah. I'm looking at a lot of the inferences which are actually quite correct. But you realize that what matters isn't so much what is the correct answer, which is kind of neat, but now all these students are asking all these questions. Who is this guy? Where is it? What's going on? And so on. And that's more than anything what I wanted to show you tonight. The person in the figure is Peter Jones, who was a Mississauga chief along the Credit River, but also a Methodist minister. And what you're seeing behind him are some of the villages of the mission that he started, pretty much where the QEW runs across the Credit River right now. And the picture is some of the houses and the school and the churchyard. And then I've got up some of the Ojibwe hymns that he translated, giving evidence to that idea that he's a Christian minister. So not only have I had you analyze and really observe the photo, I've had you look at inferences, but now we're also looking at collaborating different documents, which is a whole other skill again. So all of those different skills that students are getting engaged in, and also all those questions that they're asking. Can I switch? So looking at using those sources, some of the skills that we used, we formulated all kinds of questions. We were analyzing and interpreting by making those inferences. We didn't as much, but we could certainly get into applying historical thinking concepts. What's the significance of this person? What did he cause? Was getting into change in continuity? Was it a positive change, a negative change? And looking at his perspective, because he was First Nations and he was European at a very interesting time in our history. And with the evaluated and drawing conclusions, of course, that's where those corroborating evidence pieces come together. That we have the hymns and we have the picture and we have the picture of the houses and so on. All of which are skills that are involved in inquiry as it's in the social studies document. I'm just watching our time, so I wanted to show you just quickly. This is a really neat book if you're looking at using primary sources in the classroom, called Examining the Evidence by Hilary McCaustin and Kathleen Thompson. You'll notice it's 7 strategies. I broke it down to 6 because they fit on the page nicer. But identifying what you're looking at, determining the purpose and audience, looking for bias, examining the source closely, considering your role in the interaction, which is really neat. That's very much a historical perspective thing, and then corroborating with other sources. And the book nicely walks you through a lot of those different strategies. But I want to get to the video because it's one thing to pick up some kind of a primary source and use it to kind of get a unit going. But how do you then take a few primary sources and build an entire unit around it? Some suggestions starting with sources that cover different sections of the content area. So you're controlling that. Kids aren't just picking to do whatever they want. They're formulating questions based on pictures that you've chosen that cover a certain content area. Then you need to focus on the inquiry skills involved and focusing on that more than on the content. If you look closely at the social studies curriculum documents, you'll notice that all the A1 and A2 specific expectations are inquiry-based and performance-based. It's really only in A3 where you get into content and understanding. And so if we're going to properly assess kids in achieving the new curriculum, inquiry is a key way to do that, to cover all of those different steps. Based on that, developing specific learning goals, establishing clear success criteria, and then looking into different ways of assessing. As Louise said earlier that Peter wasn't walking home, I don't walk home with piles of essays and so on at the end of the day or tests, because we've been assessing all day, walking around, talking to students, observing them, and trying to record some of those conversations or notes on observations and different products. But I think the video does a better job actually at explaining it. So just let me give you a second explaining the background of the video. It is my class, and we were looking at grade 8 post-Confederation, where you have all kinds of seemingly unrelated things happening. And what I did is I based the unit around the question, was Confederation successful? And I did it using political cartoons. So I'm going to turn it over to Colin, who's going to show you how to get to the video. While you're watching the video, be thinking of, first of all, how are primary sources used in the unit, and looking at what are some of the skills that are assessed throughout that unit.
Oh, sorry, they were just having some trouble putting that link into this thing. I'm not sure what's going on. Oh, I see what's happening. Here, let's try it again. Why? No, it's doing what it did the other night. I'm sorry, everybody. Listen, I've got the link in the chat box, and now I will try it one more time to put it in this web tour box, but it doesn't seem to want to let me do that. Grrr. It's just not letting me click in there for some reason. This has happened a few other times before. So I'm going to apologize and say that please click the link in the chat box, which will then open the link in your browser rather than in the web tour, because it doesn't seem to want to let me work this time. So, like I said, I put the link in the chat. Click that link. How long is the video, James? And then give us a green check mark when you've come back. Thank you, Kaylee.
My mic was off. It's about 6 minutes.
Okay, so in about 6.5 minutes, then we'll give us a check mark when you come back into Collaborate, everybody. Sorry about that. Just a reminder to give us the green check mark when you come back. Looks like most people have finished, but just to make sure everybody's completed, give us that check mark when you come back, and then we'll move on.
And Colin, I noticed some people are already writing on the screen answers to those questions, and I didn't even ask you. You're a great student.
Perfect.
So if people wanted to continue doing that for another minute or so while we wait for the others, that'd be great. I noticed the comment using it as an introduction, but also as the springboard going into the culminating task. So it's not just, oh, today we're doing this, and then we're going back to something else, but it's all connected. And forming questions, we spent a good week or so just coming up with criteria for what a good question looks like. And the kids came up with their own criteria that's better than anything I've ever seen published in a book. But it took a lot of time, and it took them a little bit to get used to taking that amount of time to develop questions, rather than having them given to them by the teacher. I'm seeing collaborating, and I usually have students working in different groups, topic groups, but then they break off and they conduct their own research. But that collaboration piece is really important. They'd rather listen to their friend than you anyway, so you might as well make it constructive. I think before we go on, and if you're conscious of the time, we are almost done. We're going to talk a little bit about resources and where to get some prime resources and networking opportunities too. But when you watch something like that, it might be a little overwhelming. When I started with trying inquiry, that political cartoon unit, for example, it's a unit that I taught before, but where I was at the center and I was doing all of the teaching and instruction. And it's something that worked, and all I really had to do was tweak it a little bit and change the focus around that big question: why was Confederation successful? Change the focus to be around my watching what students are doing rather than having them listen to what I have to say. So changing that focus a little bit in order to turn it into the inquiry unit that you saw there. And that was the second shot I had at it too. So it's not, when I started with inquiry, it was little pieces and chunks and so on. Then I'd go for a month and for a whole unit. And then eventually walked in September instead of doing the whole year as inquiry. But you want to start small. You want to take something that you think is accessible to you. And it's tricky too, because it's got to be something that fits your teaching style, because your teaching style is different from anybody else's. And try to make these different things fit your approach to it. But a common question that comes up after this, of course, is where can you find primary sources like that? And we are in a wonderfully digital age today. There's so many online resources now. The Canadian Museum of History is fantastic. The McCord Museum is great, especially for grade 7 New France, which I've used a lot of this year. Archives of Ontario, they have a lot of online exhibits as well for primary sources. The Royal Ontario Museum actually has traveling exhibits if you contact them, and they come in little kits and so on, which is kind of neat. I always say to people, look into your local archives and local museums, and trying to develop a partnership with them. You never know what they're going to let you come out with, or maybe you can take your class there. And then also there's a link to one of the other projects that we did last year, we being OESTA, is developing a list of different resources, not just primary, some secondary videos, websites, and so on. And we have them broken down according to grade. So depending on the grade you're looking at, you go into that website, to that particular folder, and click on the grade that you're interested in, and there's all kinds of resources there.
James,
networking.
I want to interrupt you for a second. Kaylee asked a really cool question in the chat. And she just asked in the chat, how long did it take them to become interested in learning this way? I'm assuming talking about the kids. Can you maybe speak a little bit about how the kids dealt with sort of your change in approach?
Well, it's a really good question. And I've talked to a number of other teachers who have, well, one especially secondary school, where credits are on the line and so on, and some of the negative feedback they've gotten. I've never had a negative comment yet. And I've always turned to kids, I've said, is this making sense? Like, I'm making this up as I go? Like, are you following? I've not had any resistance from parents or whatever. I keep waiting for it. I keep pushing the envelope and expecting it. But, you know, they're engaged and they're excited. If anything, sometimes it's hard to kind of keep track of them all the time, and yeah, they're going to goof off a little bit. But I noticed one of the things, I think it's the collaboration book that Louise talked about earlier. One of the things that it said in that book was, if you have something that's going to work, you know, 90% of the time in the business world, you're going to go with that model. Why don't we do that in education? That if most kids are going to get hooked on this. The other neat thing with inquiry is you kind of get to know pretty quickly what students you need your help more than others, and inquiry allows you to do that instead of being at the front again and talking and so on. Once I get an inquiry set up, there are some students I know have pretty much got the project done before I even end the sentence. But I know which students to go to, and I can go over and I can help and guide them, and I can meet them where they're at and shape the inquiry in a way that makes sense to them. So yeah, I keep waiting for that resistance. It hasn't come yet. When it comes, maybe I'll let you know. I've been trying to follow. Are there any other? Like I said, even with parents too, and expecting that. And all of my marking is through levels. I almost never give out grades. All of my tests are written by students based on what their groups come up with. They come up with the questions, and I find it's not made any real difference in the sense of marks or grades. But it makes a huge difference when I walk in the classroom and everybody's happy to be there and excited for the next step or the next crazy thing that Mr. Steves is going to throw at them. So, and there is always that accountability. We have, in the video you probably saw, there were some reflection journals, and there were the questions. Actually, we used criteria for their inquiry questions, and then on a blog through the classroom website, they actually gave comments to each other about their questions, saying, it's a little bit, it could be more open-ended and so on if you did this or that, and that was another way of assessing those students, giving feedback within their groups and so on, and ultimately a rubric at the end. So there are those opportunities for keeping kids accountable. So yeah, we were talking about where to find those primary sources, and there's a number of sites there. I won't bother going into them because they will be, they're in the PowerPoint, which will be shared at the end, I believe. And then I was wondering if, Louise, did you want to jump in and talk about the networking?
Sure. I just wanted to say a few things from what you were saying, and we have the same feeling about the students in our classroom and the type of participation that we have from the students. it's very rare that students are off task. They're usually engaged and motivated, and I think a lot of that has to do with giving them chunks of time to be able to explore. I'm not sure if you feel the same way. And the one thing that we usually do is we make sure that within those chunks of time that it's not just the one content that we're dealing with. So if we're looking at, we'll also be looking at literacy. We could also be maybe looking at something to do with math, so that one of your students even said that you're combining subjects together so that it doesn't feel like you're overwhelmed with curriculum, because you're integrating it throughout the day and taking a look at what the students want. And I think that's what I get from a feeling from your class, James, is that you're listening to your students and that they have a voice. And that was really neat to hear some of those grade 8 students share that. I'm going to ask people to let me know if by giving me a green check if they're on. Let me know if you're on Twitter, and if you are, a green check, and then also put your Twitter handle in the chat box.
Like I was saying earlier while you're doing that, last year I don't know what I would have done without Twitter. And there are people all over the province now, and I feel like they're my best friend, and I've never met them. But they are the ones that helped me through, you know, trying my project of doing inquiry all year last year. And just sharing with them and knowing that other people had the same feelings and the same worries and so on. That Twitter was a real asset to me as I went through that. It still is.
I agree, James. It's really a network that you can learn a lot. It's a constant source of resource, new ideas to explore. Now, Awesta has a Twitter handle, and we do have a Twitter chat that happens every other Thursday, and we do have one tonight at 9 o'clock. For those of you who are on Twitter, I see there's 4 of you. And tonight we're talking about First Nations, Métis, Inuit, and we have a special guest that's facilitating the chat. And you can, if you check the SSHG hashtag while you're on Twitter, it'll also give you some of the archived conversations that we've already had. And most of those conversations are topics that are connected to our social studies, history, and geography. See, somebody's written something. It does take a long time for students to shift. Just as teachers, for teachers, it takes time, but you really do have to, and I think it's better to take the time to make sure that students are independent and student-driven, and then you'll be successful for the rest of the year. But not to give up, but to keep going until they've got it. And I think those are skills that are going to help them throughout their teaching or their career, their school career.
Mm-hmm.
Now, we've listed here some of the ministry documents. Educate, even though it says financial literacy education, it has some great lessons and viewing guides for the social studies curriculum document. And a lot of people aren't aware of that because I think of the title, but it's really a nice connection, and I know that there are some other projects going on with the financial literacy / social studies that'll be posted on the OESTA website. I'm not sure if it'll be on EduGames or not, but for sure the OESTA website. OTF, of course, has a great support, a great document, and it's all about inquiry and getting started. So if you have a chance to look at that, I think you probably get a lot out of that. And then there's a list of other resources here. Well, OESTA for sure. I wish we had time to take you through that, because and please do take the time to take a look at that website. It's a plethora of ideas. You just can't believe what's in there. And every time I go on there, I find something new that I didn't know was there before. There's I've got a couple of websites that I've included here. I've also included the book that we started our inquiry with. I've talked about the historical thinking concept. I put down here a podcast that we've used before, and one of the things about students is to provoke them and challenge their thinking. And this podcast is very good for students to listen to. So and really challenges the way history is presented to us and challenges their thinking. So it was a great kickoff kind of to a unit that we were working on. So the exit card. So we have a few minutes, and we were hoping that you would maybe share in the chat box if you have some other questions for us, or if you would share things that you've learned or questions that you have, and then strategies that you might be taking back to in your classroom tomorrow. If you could I'll just turn off my mic, and if you could just share, that would be great, and we'll answer your questions.
I noticed the comment breaking inquiry down into different steps, and I know that it can seem very large and daunting and so on, but if you can break it down, and the curriculum does a nice job of setting that up for you. If you look at the beginning of different grade levels, it will give you, there's a chart that gives you the big questions, and it gives you some of the thinking concepts that might apply and so on. They've done a really nice job setting that up for teachers. I noticed the question.
One of the other things, James, I was just going to mention is that when you're looking at the curriculum, not to be overwhelmed, but rather to take those big ideas and work with those big ideas instead of trying to look at the specifics all the time. Yeah.
Yeah, what you assess is the overall expectations, not the specific. Like ultimately, that's what matters. And the specific kind of helps to flush that out a little bit. But you can have groups working on different specifics and sharing that out and so on. I noticed there's a question about resources for younger grades. And one of the links to the OESTA website is that project I was talking about, where it goes grade by grade and gives different resources, so websites, books, all kinds of different things, and that's by grade. So that would be one way of doing that. I see the star by the observations and inferencing too. It's so simple, but it's so it can be so effective. And I've seen a lot of things that are very complex, and it's hard for kids to grasp. But if you say what you see, what you think it is, they seem to be able to grasp that pretty quickly.
Just to jump in there with that, it's an easy entry point too, because everybody can say what they see in a picture. There's no wrong answer. If you see a red jacket, it's a red jacket. So that's what I found, is it gives an easy place for every kid to have a voice and to have an entry into some learning.
Yes, for sure. I see the comment in the chat box about science, and inquiry and science seem to go together. And I've found it interesting talking to colleagues that kind of say, well, how does it fit with history? Because for history, inquiry comes naturally as well. But it does get me thinking, too, about multidisciplinary teaching. The political cartoons one, for example, I was also assessing media literacy. With the same project, the same time when I was assessing the history curriculum. So inquiry gives you that opportunity to integrate so many different subject areas. And I always say to the kids, well, you're doing one thing and I'm getting 3 marks out of it. And they never seem to complain about that.
I've changed the slide over, and there's a quote up there: "The future belongs to the curious, the ones who are not afraid to try it, explore it, look at it, question it, and turn it inside out." If there are any questions, any other questions? I think we need another hour to share the OESTA website and all the amazing resources that are on that site.
Yes, lots of good stuff there. And I put it in the chat, but if people missed it, you will be getting an email tomorrow with all of the links and links to the videos and links to the various websites that we talked about this evening. So you'll be able to get all those and explore those at your leisure. All right. Well, I'm going to zip here then, and I'm going to say thanks on behalf of everybody to James and Louise. That was a very cool session. Like I said, on the top, I always love getting more ideas around inquiry, and I love the idea of primary sources and being a science teacher and that time to think about going to primary science sources and get kids thinking about that. So it's very cool. So I appreciate that as well. So thank you very much, you guys. It was a really cool session, and I see lots of thanks coming up in the chat here as well. So I think everybody gleaned some stuff out of it this evening that they can take with them. So on behalf of OTF, like I said, thanks to Louise and James, and thanks to everybody for joining us. I know when we started, I checked my computer and it was like 22 degrees or something. Oh, it's still 21 degrees. So it's a lovely day out there, so I appreciate you guys deciding to join us this evening as opposed to taking a nice long walk, which is something that I think we'll get to do more of as the weather hopefully stays warm. If you've done sessions before, you know sort of what's coming next. We always ask you to fill out a link to a feedback survey that helps OTF plan and give some feedback to the presenters, and then plan for future presentations in OTF. So you can either click that link and that'll open it up, but also when you exit out of Blackboard Collaborate this evening, that link will pop up in your browser automatically, and you can fill that out. Once you fill that out, you'll get presented with an option to go and print off a certificate. You'll be able to fill out, put your name on it, and it will print off a certificate, print off a PDF, and then you can print that off if you'd like for your portfolio or what have you. The certificate option is only available for 48 hours following a session, so please do the feedback, and then if you want that certificate, go and grab that. Just at the bottom is a link to the OTF Connect's learning calendar with just some upcoming sessions. We're almost done, actually. We finish on the 1st of June, but there's still 3 more weeks of very interesting sessions. So if you wanted to jump in and get a bit more learning done before the school year winds to a complete halt, please join us for some of these upcoming sessions as well. Just a quick closing, there's a couple of things. OTF offers subsidies for taking ABQs and AQs, particularly in things you see here. Math is a particular focus right now. So there's money available. That information is available on the OTF website if you're planning on taking a course this summer, for example. Speaking of the summer, I got 3 quick things to point out to you. This is new if you've joined us before. OTF always does a bunch of things over the summer, and so just to point out to people that we've got what's called the Summer Institutes, which are like 3-day sessions that happen a few times over the summer. Registration starts this week, and there's information on that website. As well, there's a conference that is coming up at the end of the summer, like August 24th, I believe it is, or 27th, somewhere in there. Pedagogy Before Technology, and OTF conferences are always really interesting and engaging. And again, that information is on that website, and will be registration opens up in 2 weeks. And then finally, something called the Teacher Learning Co-op is a new thing that I hadn't heard about, but the deadline is at the end of the month, and it's basically a learning cooperative where you pick a learning goal and pick a plan, get a group of teachers together, and go and do cool stuff together. That's another really cool thing that OTF offers as well. So
Colin,
lots going on.
If I can interrupt, sorry, just for a second, with the Summer Institutes, that OESTA does have our name in for one of those institutes, so we're waiting to see, I think, the end of July. So keep an eye out for that. If you want to carry on this conversation, hopefully we're going to have one of those sessions.
Perfect. That's a great segue, James. I appreciate that very much. And that's what always happens with those summer institutes, is they're kind of subject or topic based, and lots of other outside associations tend to facilitate those through OTF. So it's always a very cool thing. All right, so thanks again, everybody. I'm going to stop the recording now.